Okay, so Renato, welcome to the show, my friend. I mean, you are the perfect person to have on the show today. So let's just jump right into it. What do you think of the Supreme Court's recent decision to hear the Trump immunity case? Dying to hear your perspective.
Well, it's devastating for all of us who were hoping to see a January 6th trial before the election. I just do not see that happening. Is it theoretically possible? Sure. Like, it's possible that everything could line up. I think it's very unlikely. And if you look at the court's order, they are very careful in how they worded it. They actually cleaned up some of Trump's arguments. Trump's arguments were really out there, okay? Absolute immunity for everything a president ever did. And they basically inserted some language in there in the order yesterday that's essentially said that the question before the Supreme Court is, to what extent there's immunity for presidential acts, official acts by a president. So what I could see happening is the Supreme Court saying, well, in some limited circumstances, a president has immunity, and we're remanding to the district court so Judge Chutkan can hold some hearings and figure out whether this fits into that window. That's what I suspect is going to happen. And of course, that would push everything past the election.
Right. I mean, I could certainly understand if Donald von Schitzenpants was sitting in the war room, right? And it was all about taking out the head of Hamas or an Osama bin Laden, somebody that the United States has been searching for some terroristic act against America. I could understand a president having immunity from such an action, right? But I'm not sure how any of the things that he did would qualify specifically for this presidential immunity that he is seeking. How, for example, does taking top secret documents, lying on an affidavit, and having your lawyer then say everything was returned, showing top secret documents to anybody that shows up to Mar-a-Lago, I'm not sure how one can turn around and claim that whatever it is that I do, I can do because, in my opinion, a president is like a king. Not my words. Those are Donald's words. A president is a king. And in order for him to do whatever it is that he wants to do, he should have immunity from action.
Yeah, I have to say, I agree with you. I think the presidential immunity, such as it exists, has to be pretty narrow, very narrow. And realistically, sure, I agree that we shouldn't have presidents having to think about, let's say, lawsuits when they're deciding whether to bomb Syria or Iraq or something like that. I totally get that. I get that, yeah, like you said, prosecution for something that's so obviously within the core duties of the president. Sure, I could see that as well. What I suspect the Supreme Court's going to do, they're going to carve out certain parts of the presidency where there is immunity, let's say granting pardons or something like that, some core functions. Then they'll say that there's some parts that aren't part of that core. But the bottom line is, I think there's a lot of listeners of your podcast who are like hoping that ultimately Donald Trump was going to be a judge in a court of law, to be a convicted felon before the November election. And now all of their hopes, all of their everything that they've been wishing for all comes down to Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA's office, and a trial in which you're going to be a witness, Michael. Other than that, all these other cases, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how much they matter. Really, what matters is going to be how many people turn out to the polls in November.
Well, that's true. Let's also not forget that we just finished Donald just finished in a trial, the New York Attorney General. Now, of course, that's a civil case, but that ultimately is going to financially wreck him to the tune of over $500 million, to which I was a witness in that case as well. That our unsinkable New York Attorney General, Tish James, was kind enough to acknowledge my participation as being the catalyst for getting this case to the courtroom. And I take tremendous pride, to be very honest with you, in the fact that there will now be $500 million more in the coffers for New York that can go for some very good purpose and taken out of the hands of somebody who had stolen it from New York over a period of years. I feel like a one-man wrecking machine.
You had a huge impact. You have made a difference. I still remember, Michael, you went down to Capitol Hill for questioning. And a good friend of mine, my former law school classmate, roommate actually, when I was in law school, Ro Khanna, was talking to me about what questions he could ask you. And so I helped him draw up some questions to ask you about whether there was fraud or whether you saw a criminal conspiracy there. I still remember your testimony. It was absolutely riveting testimony in response to those questions. I have to think that testimony you gave, the public stance that you took, was noticed by people like the Manhattan District Attorney and the Attorney General, Ms. James.
Let's also not forget so good for you in helping, Congressman Khanna out, because to be very fair, and I was very vocal about it, not one Republican asked me a single question about anything that had to do with Donald. They basically took their 5 minutes and shit all over me, right? For for all 5 minutes. And I was like, is there going to be a single Republican that's actually going to ask me a meaningful question? You had, I forget who it was, maybe it was Comer, because he's such a fucking goofball. He turned around and he was like, do you intend on doing any media? Yes. Are you going to write a book? Yes. Are you planning on doing a movie? Sure. These were the types of questions that, they want to, you're a tax evader, you're a liar, a perjurer. First of all, as I have said since day number one, I never committed tax evasion. And I say it publicly. In fact, had they read the Petrillo sentencing memo, you would see it's the same argument that I've been making since 2018, that there was no tax evasion. At most, it would have been considered a tax omission because I never not paid taxes. Whatever my CPA told me to pay, I paid it. And I provided every single document. There's no hidden cash like Paul Manafort, but that's a whole nother story. Meanwhile, I will tell you one thing. Talk about Donald Trump being stupid. Think about, had he not thrown me under the bus, which I believe, based on my book Revenge and the investigation that we did, that FBI agent had told us that it was actually Jared and Don Jr.'s idea to throw me under the bus, right? That, and so things would be very different today, because you're right. It's the only case that he has not figured out yet how to delay.
Yeah, it's interesting. People at the time, and I'm going to raise my hand and say I was one of those people, sort of discounted the Manhattan case. It, of the cases that Trump was facing, seemed like, in my view, not as strong legally, not as high of penalties. The penalties. Well,
can we break that? Could we break that down for a second? Let's start with the first. Sure. Let's start with the second, because it's easier to go backwards that way. I agree. The penalty for business record fraud, campaign finance violation, and whatever else that the DA will throw, at him in the four corners of the complaint is not as significant as the January 6th insurrection, the Mar-a-Lago documents, right? The mishandling of classified information, or trying to overturn a free and fair election. I will never argue with you or anyone that those three are more grotesque crimes than business record fraud or campaign finance violations on. But I think you have to acknowledge they are still crimes, and they're crimes that are routinely prosecuted by the Manhattan DA's office against other people like you and me. So why are we handicapping these cases like this is the Kentucky Derby?
Well, it's interesting, Michael. So for a living, I approach this differently. I talk in the media. I have my own podcast. It's complicated and so forth. But that's like a side job for me. I spend thousands and thousands of hours a year practicing law across the country. I represent people who are facing indictments in multiple jurisdictions. And for them, I handicap things because ultimately what you have to focus on the big problems you have, not the little problems. A lot of my clients have criminal indictments and civil lawsuits and all this stuff, just like Donald Trump has on a smaller scale. Well, when you're facing, when you have like classified documents in your bathroom, okay, that is a level of problem that I can't, there's nothing I could do to explain that away to a jury. Okay, here's the photo. He has classified documents in his ballroom, his bathroom. There's nothing I could do about that. But, this case, there's at least arguments you can make and so on that, like you said, the penalties were lower. So I thought when you're facing 4 different criminal indictments, this one looked like, okay, this is at least one you could fight on. But now this may be the only one that ever goes to trial. This guy goes and becomes elected president. It is very possible that he orders Jeffrey Clark or John Eastman, whoever he appoints as Attorney General, to just squash
Mike Johnson.
These other investigators.
I believe it'll be MAGA Mike Johnson. Because he will do anything Donald asks him.
Yeah. Any of the people that I'm mentioning, Ted Cruz, whoever it ends up being, they'll quash these prosecutions. And then all that stands between Trump and being a convicted felon or having some potential prison time is Alvin Bragg and you and the other witnesses that he's assembled.
Yeah, I agree. But you know what? It kind of drives me crazy when I hear people turn around and they handicap it. Yeah, you're handicapping it as the lawyer, the professional, lawyer that you are. As the general public, we shouldn't be doing that because a crime is a crime. The extent, the level of that crime, I grant you, they have varying degrees. Think of it no different than an assault, right? You could assault somebody with your fist, and then it's just a general assault, or you could assault them with a baseball bat. And now it's a higher level, it's a higher threshold, right? It's a higher level of a crime. Or now you take out a gun, right? So it's still an assault. They still fall under the same general denominator, but they have obviously very different penalties that are associated, with them. I acknowledge this to be out of the 4, number 4. But it's not a case that Trump, his lawyers, are going to just ignore and say, yeah, I'm going to roll the fucking dice with this one. You can't roll the dice with this one. Number one, it's a state crime, so he can't pardon himself. And on top of that, this is like a 4-week trial at best. There's not that many documents. There's not that many witnesses. How long can you keep somebody on the witness stand for asking what question? Judge Merchan is not going to play the same or be as permissive as Judge Engoron was, which was very lenient. He's not going to be as lenient in terms of allowing Trump's people to escape the 4 corners of the complaint in their cross-examination and so on.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you saw, Michael, that Trump's team filed a bunch of motions in limine.
Yeah.
And they are trying to limit the trial in certain ways. They're going after you. They filed a motion in limine saying that you're going to be perjuring yourself. They're trying to turn this into a circus, just like they turned the civil the case, the AG's lawsuit. They tried to turn that into a circus,
but they failed.
They ultimately, exactly right. What they did is, I will say this though, Michael, there was too much attention paid by the media to the hijinks. Yep. I was on MSNBC during the closing arguments in the New York AG case. They cut away from me to show Donald Trump's comments in front of a bunch of American flags where he's like pontificating while I'm trying to break down the closing arguments in the case. That's what they did. I do think there was an element of distraction there. I think though, because the stakes are so high for Trump, it's going to be interesting to see what they pull out. Are you, as a potential witness, do you pay any attention to that? Do you put that out of your mind? I mean, I'm curious.
No.
As somebody who's probably like your listeners, right?
So
like,
the answer is no.
What is that like for you?
It's a nightmare. It's miserable. It's a nightmare and a half. I'm not going in because I want to go in. And I made that crystal clear to everybody. I'm subpoenaed. It's not as if I have a choice. I am subpoenaed to come and testify. The threats that come against me, are voluminous. The attacks on social media platforms are voluminous. I had to shut down my home phone because we would be getting phone calls in the middle of the night. And every night I would take the phone off the hook. So what the fuck was the point to have it? So we just got rid of a phone number that we had for the last, 20 years. This is what the MAGAs do. It's all about, and Trump is the impetus for why they do it. He's telling them to do it. In his mob voice, he's telling them what he wants. And even if he doesn't say it, they think that they're doing him the favor by doing these sorts of things. It's terrible. They attack the judges. They attack judges' law clerks. They attack witnesses. They attack prosecutors. They attack everybody that poses a threat to him. And it's miserable.
I think what people sometimes don't recognize is the impact that has on people and their families. When I was a federal prosecutor, Michael, I had immense, very serious threats on my life. I had a guy who escaped from prison and had told the other inmates that he wanted to kill me. So I had to go in protective custody for a period of time while they were searching and locating him. I had people put hits out on me. It's very scary thing for your family.
Yeah.
When you are in a circumstance where you are getting death threats or you're afraid for your life or you're afraid for your safety, has that had an impact on your family?
It has. It has.
Yeah.
How could it not? Imagine, this is the ultimate David and Goliath story. If it wasn't that this story has already been told for thousands of years, this would be it. Even while I was in Otisville, I was fighting with the President of the United States. The threats that I used to get even from correctional officers was enormous, including the administration. Nobody wants to even continue to talk about the unconstitutional remand of me back to Otisville because I wouldn't waive my First Amendment constitutional rights off of I used the word fraudulent. Jamie Raskin, who I was talking to just this morning on it, he called it a much better word. He called it a concocted document, which is exactly what it was. You see, as well as anybody, every federal document has a corresponding identification number to it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. They all have, and that's how they refer to them. Oh, yeah, the F-102s, whatever the numbers might be. This document had no identifying number to it because it was an illegitimate, fraudulent document. They created it specifically for me. Instead of, and I'm talking about the FLM, which is the Federal Location Monitoring Agreement. The Federal Location Monitoring Agreement has an identification number, but that's not the one they gave me. The one they gave me, the paragraph number 1, violated my First Amendment constitutional rights. And myself and my friend, Jeffrey K. Levine, who's a lawyer, been a friend of mine since we were 14 years old, came with me to the courthouse because something smelled wrong. Well, lo and behold, they then give they then turn around, ask me to sign it. We say, well, it needs to be tamped down. They turn around, they tell us to wait in the hallway, in the waiting area. Next thing I know, there's 3 marshals there, big motherfuckers, right? With a remand order that was signed by Patrick McFarland, who's a residential reentry manager over at Manhattan Correctional in Brooklyn. But he signed a remand order off of a fraudulent document. And we still can't get an investigation into how something like this happens. Let me be very clear. I know how it happens. The big guy turned around and told them, make it happen. Make sure he doesn't talk to the media. Make sure he's not writing a book. He's not publishing a book. That neither are his family or any of his friends. So they covered all the Trump bases to protect him. But they created a fake document. It's a fraud. It's a concocted document. And this asshole, Patrick McFarland, remands me back to Otisville off of a concocted document. And if you think that this is going to be unique solely to me, if God forbid 1,000,000 times Donald Trump gets back into office, it is not. Imagine a fucking concocted document that they typed up themselves or that they gave to these two assholes over at the Department of Corrections, this Enid Phoebus and this Adam Pakula. And they give it to me. Oh, no, this was not done for you. Bullshit. Because I signed the FLM when I was ultimately released after the habeas petition was granted. This is not normal stuff. And this is what I fear. Mariotto, let me say this to you. There is a likely chance that you too are on the Donald Trump hit list for all the things that you say about him. And I'm not saying that you're top 10. Let me be clear. Mariano, I don't think that you are. All right? Nevertheless, I think you are definitely on that list. So now all of a sudden, something gets concocted because he didn't like what you said on this podcast. And next thing you know, SEAL Team 6 is coming to your house. They're going to bag you, tag you, throw you in Guantanamo Bay because the president told them to. What? That's not America. That's North Korea. That's Russia. That's Putin. That's Xi Jinping. That's not normal shit for America. And anybody that wants something like that wants to see our American democracy go to the toilet, I think you're in the wrong country.
Yeah, I've heard from other people that they're very concerned if Trump is reelected for their own safety. I'll have people mention this to me, like, will we end up being in a gulag? What will happen? Is that something you're afraid of?
Very much so.
How do you feel about it?
Renato, I have had this conversation with many people who also believe that they are top 10 on the Donald Trump hit list. And everybody is concerned that after he made the statement that on day one, he wants to rewrite the Constitution, he wants to strip the legislative branch and the judiciary of their tripartite, co-branch of government powers and confer all of the power to the executive branch, namely himself, in basically creating himself to be a king, a monarch, a ruler, a Führer, supreme leader, whatever you want to call him. That's what's going to happen. And let me tell you something. It's what he wants to happen.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt, and I don't think anyone really can deny that Donald Trump has. I think it's understating it to say it's authoritarian tendencies.
Yep.
He's a guy who proudly proclaims his authoritarianism. Like, he will say, "I'll be a dictator for a day," and he gets applause and cheers. Right? He is, I think, cultivating a cult of hero worship. I wouldn't say hero worship, but a worship of him as an authoritarian amongst a segment of the United States. Yep. I have to believe, because I have enough faith in the United States and our citizens, that is not going to carry him to the presidency a second time. But it should be alarming everyone.
Yeah, Renato, do me a favor, because you're a smart guy. Name one person in history who was a dictator on a Monday and gave up that power on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
I don't think that is.
I can't think of that kind of person. Though the people who actually give up opportunities to hold power are people who are revered in history. People like George Washington, who maybe could have become a king and didn't. John Carlos in Spain, who decided to have a constitutional monarchy as opposed to trying to seize power after Franco left. Those people are remembered in history. And it's because what they do is so rare and so significant. Donald Trump is not cut from that
No,
cloth.
he's
He's
not.
still George Washington.
So, Renato, let me ask you this then. Do you think that the court's majority is actively trying to put their finger on the scale in favor of Trump and his reelection bid?
That's really hard because I'm not an amateur psychologist, right? Some people do that. George Conway's is diagnosing everyone. I try to stay away from that. I think you need 4 votes to grant cert. So I think that there clearly were votes to do that. There's clearly some people in the court who wanted to examine this. I think if they were on this podcast, what they'd say is like that there were difficult questions of presidential immunity that they had to grapple with. It's interesting because I do think, Michael, they took rather absurd arguments that Trump made. I mean, Trump's argument is I could use SEAL Team 6 to assassinate Michael Cohen, and that's immune. I'm immune from that. I mean, that's literally his perspective. But I think they've remade them into arguments that they are refined them into arguments that are at least worthy of some sort of consideration by the court. I don't know. What I will say is I don't believe that the United States Supreme Court is going to hold that presidents can murder people, murder, rape, and pillage and get away with it. I don't think that will happen. But I think the timing of this, is cause for concern. And I can see why people are questioning that. I can see why people are concerned about the Supreme Court, especially given some of the other questionable activity that, that folks have pointed to, all these articles that have come out about, the justices and so forth.
Have you ever wished that you had a whiter and a brighter smile? Well, before you visit a dentist, you should know that their whitening treatments can be very expensive. And it's not just the price. You also have to book the appointment and schedule time away from work or family to sit in a dentist's office chair while undergoing the procedure. I mean, let's be honest, it's a hassle. Fortunately, now you can try Smile Actives at home or anywhere, anytime. Smile Actives offers a safe and an affordable alternative to those expensive whitening processes. Like most people, I'm a big coffee drinker. I drink a ton of coffee. And over time, I've noticed that my teeth have lost some of their brightness that I was originally used to seeing. 97% of Smile Active users in a clinical trial reported up to 6 shades whiter on average, all within 30 days. I'm using it. Look. I mean, simply add Smile Active Pro Whitening Gel to your regular toothpaste. It's been formulated with polyclean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into your teeth's grooves and crannies so that you get better whitening. Smile Actives makes a teeth whitening gel that can simply be added to your toothpaste every time that you brush your teeth. So no change in your routine, no extra time, and no more messy strips, trays, or lights. People will start commenting on your whiter, your brighter smile in just days. Smile Actives is the whitening boost your favorite toothpaste needs to give you the smile that you deserve. So I want you all right now to visit smileactives.com/Cohen today to receive a special buy one, get one free offer with auto delivery plus free shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/Cohen. Terms and conditions apply, so see the site for details. Renato, what's to stop Donald? And I say this, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I know him. I know his nature. If hypothetically he wins, let me start by saying there is no more Congress. All right? There is no more Congress. He'll allow the Republicans to stay on, call themselves whatever they want, but they don't make laws, right? They're not going to be putting forth bills or anything like that. He will tell them what he wants, but there will not be Republicans and Democrats any longer. And you say, well, how is that possible? Well, again, if he rewrites the Constitution and he strips the legislative branch of its co-equal powers under the Constitution, fuck do you need a member of Congress for anymore? You don't exist. I'll tell you something else. These fucking 9, judges with these black robes don't need you either anymore, because there is no more Supreme Court. Donald Trump is the Supreme Court. He is the king. He confers all power to himself. There will be no stopping him whatsoever. Could you imagine? Let's use Adolf Hitler as the example. Was there a Supreme Court in Germany? You think the Supreme Court was going to hold that Adolf Hitler committed a crime? The answer is no. He becomes the law. He becomes the government. He becomes the king.
Well, it's interesting. I was at the Holocaust Museum, and one image, I've been there multiple times in DC, and one of the images that always stands out in my mind is there's actually a group of Nazi judges with Nazi regalia on their robes, swastika and so forth. And it just is a reminder, by the way, that you can't just, following the law in and of itself, right? It certainly has some virtue to it, but you have to qualify that by looking at what the laws are, right? So, right. What I will say, one thing that I think, so I believe that if Donald Trump was here and we gave him truth serum, I don't know if there's truth serum that is
powerful. It's not potent enough.
Exactly. But we zapped him with a truth ray. I think he would agree with you that is his goal. Yeah. That's, in fact, what I thought. I think he in his mind thought he was walking into in 2017. I mean, I think he thought when he became president that he could be like Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin. Mm-hmm. I think he wants to get there. And I think the question is, I personally think in his first term, he did not have the wherewithal or like the savvy to get there. He had a lot of people around him who wanted to throw roadblocks, wanted to stop him from doing what he was doing. These people from within the administration that were trying to slow that down and push against that. That's what he calls the deep state. What is concerning to me is the plans that have been outlined by some very impressive reporters, Jonathan Swan and others, both, now is at the New York Times, outlining his plans to essentially purge the federal workforce, replace those people with loyalists. I mean, on paper, Michael, there's no way for him to accomplish what you said. The Constitution is what it is. It's extraordinarily difficult to amend. The United States Supreme Court has power.
Putin did it.
And that, I hear you.
And if Donald Trump is the copycat that we both believe him to be, Putin did it.
The fact that, I have enough faith in this country to believe that we would resist it, but the fact that we're having this conversation, and I can't promise your listeners that what you're saying is impossible, it should alarm everyone who's listening.
Well, the reason Renato, that I say it's not impossible, because he did it to me. I am the first political prisoner held by my own country because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional rights. And I still can't get a single FOIA document out of government, over 2.5 years fighting for it, in court on it. All right. And on top of that, can't get my day in court because of the overturning of the Dobbs decision, which affects the Bivens case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I will say, I'm sure you're learning. I've learned firsthand for some of my clients, it's hard to get FOIA documents from government, particularly when they know you're fighting them. So I will tell you, I share your pain. When I'm trying to FOIA things on behalf of my clients, I have some similar problems. But I think that, the stakes really can't be higher for our country. The election matters tremendously. And whether you are, one thing that I like about having this conversation with you, Michael, is you and I, you could tell I'm very careful. I'm more careful. I have a different perspective about how I view the danger. But we both see a lot of danger here for our country. We both see a tremendous amount of turmoil for our country. Journalists are performing a heroic service by reporting on this. But for them, it's a story, right?
Right.
This is the most interesting story of their lifetimes. They're reporting a story. And if, but for you and I, there's something more at stake. We come from different perspectives. For me, what got me talking about this stuff, which, by the way, gets me a lot of hate and ire does not help my bottom line. Okay, I actually lose money and lose time by spending all my time doing this stuff. But I do this because I care so much about the institutions, like firing Comey and trying to help end his friend's investigation, Michael Flynn's investigation. That inspired me to speak out. For you, it's very personal, but regardless, we see something above and beyond ourselves, and we see, I would say, a danger that our country faces, and that's very real. And if you're listening to this and you're not taking that seriously, and you're got fatigue after all these years, and you're like, hey, I've focused on enough elections, I'm kind of over it. You're choosing a wrong time to take some time off.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Now, Trump's team, I'm talking about his legal team, the bunch of fucking bozos that they are, right? It's like a D team. Somebody who's facing as much shit as Donald is, you would really want to have the A team. This guy's got the D team, but his D team has argued that his taking classified documents was an official act, which is really a nod, wink, wink to Judge Cannon, that she can hit the pause button on the Mar-a-Lardo case if the Supreme Court takes his immunity case, which it has, and which I'll bet $1 million that she will do, right? Do me a favor. By the way, that wasn't the real offer. All right. Will you expand on that for me, please? Expand for my listeners this whole idea of what's going on there.
So here's what I would say. One thing I just want all your listeners or viewers to understand is that trial judges like Cannon, like Judge Cannon, like Judge Chutkan, they have extraordinary control over their docket, extraordinary control of how fast they move cases along or how slow they move cases along. And boy, you couldn't imagine two different people than the two judges I just mentioned. Judge Chutkan moving that docket along quickly, Judge Cannon not moving it along quickly. One reason that I have not been focused as much on that filing in Cannon's courtroom, Michael, is because I never thought she'd bring this to trial anyway, before the election anyway. I mean, she was doing all these small things to expand the schedule out. I've had on my podcast, It's Complicated, I've had this guy who's on Twitter as Secrets and Laws, who used to be the deputy general counsel of the CIA. Mm-hmm. And he talked to me. We walked through the classified document issues in that case. And he was noting that for under SEPA, which is the relevant statute, you did not need to add as much time as she's been adding to the schedule. She's been padding the schedule along the whole way to kind of set up the emotion that Trump is going to file this summer to push off that trial after the election. So I feel like that was already baked into Judge Cannon. I never had any hope that that case was going to go to trial before the election. But I agree, Trump's team is serving this up. And, stealing classified documents and putting them in your bathroom, I don't know how you call that an official act. They're basically asserting that while president, he did whatever. I agree with you. I think she'll use that as an excuse. Who knows? She might give herself some other outs as well. But one thing that courts of appeal rarely do is scrutinize how quickly or how slowly district judges, just average trial judges, federal trial judges, how they manage their cases.
Yeah. I don't know why people aren't more up in arms about this whole issue about the documents. First of all, they're top secret documents. It's the reason why you have the National Archives, the reason why they take these documents and don't allow people like Donald to have them in the bathroom or in his desk or on the floor at, directly above the catering hall where there's thousands of people that come and go on any given months, is because it's our national security. Fuck it. I don't care. You don't like Michael Cohen. You love Donald Trump. That's great. Do you not love your house? Do you not love your family? There are top secret documents that will injure the national security of this country if, in fact, that information is leaked to somebody that somehow gets that info to one of our adversaries. All right. That's just what it does. It puts our life in jeopardy. So the fact that people aren't more up in arms that he was so fucking flippant with the documents and he's showing to any idiot that's willing to sit there and talk to him about it. And he showed it to people. This we know. Why people aren't more up in arms, I don't get. For your own self-preservation. How could you not be up in arms?
I from my perspective, from a lawyer's perspective, I thought that case was on its own tier.
Me too.
It was like, I'm a gamer, so there's all these tiers people make online. There's like S tier is the highest tier. S tier in terms of Donald Trump problems was that case, from my perspective, because first of all, it is ridiculously easy to prove. Like classified documents are like meth or heroin. If you've got like classified documents in your trunk, you're guilty. Like that's it. I mean, it's like having a pound of meth in your trunk. Like it is what it is.
There's only one case, by the way.
You're guilty.
There's only one case that's actually easier to prove than the documents case, and that's the Alvin Bragg case.
What's that?
The Alvin Bragg case, yeah.
Fair enough. But that is it. To me, that's the documents case, super easy. No question, he's got the docs. They wanted him back. He wouldn't give them back. No question, he desperately wanted to keep those documents. They got him on tape talking about the documents. So there's no question they got him dead to rights on that document case. And the penalties are severe for like stealing a lot of classified documents. So to me, like I literally could have one of my young associate attorneys, a few years out of law school, handle that case and they would win because it's almost impossible to lose that case. So I viewed that as just like the biggest problem Trump had. And the question was just, could he delay it long enough to quash it, right? Corruptly quash the investigation. I mean, the problem is all Judge Cannon there, because Judge Cannon clearly has an incentive or he has it in her mind that she wants to delay it.
The funny thing, we could probably make a game show out of it. 100 questions or less. I think you could actually finish that entire trial in 100 questions. I really do. I mean, I think it's just that it's that simple. So let me move on. Let's talk about Mitch McConnell for a second. Do you think it's just a coincidence that he announced his retirement on the same day as the Supreme Court decision to hear Trump's case?
That's interesting. I don't know that. I will say it's not a coincidence that he is announcing his retirement right when Donald Trump might become president of the United States again. I don't think Mitch McConnell has any interest in working collaboratively with Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form going forward. And the thing is with Mitch McConnell is he's on Team Mitch McConnell. Some people are on Team America and they're putting country over themselves. He's on his own team. He's not even on the Republican team. He's on his own team. And he's moving his own agenda forward. And, he got disgusted with Trump after January 6th. And I don't think they really get along anymore. And I just think he wants nothing to do with Trump. And this for the first time in his life, he's going to take a break.
Yeah. I mean, look at all the things that McConnell has done to degrade our court system. I mean, in your opinion, because I know my opinion on this one, has there ever been anyone more destructive to the rule of law than Mitch McConnell? I don't think so.
Well, I will tell you that the way I would put it is I think there's never been anyone more destructive to having public confidence in the authority of the court than Mitch McConnell. Because what Mitch McConnell did is he is so crassly political about judicial nominations that he basically convinced a huge percentage of the country, majority of the country, that we have illegitimate justices in the Supreme Court, that we have illegitimacy amongst many of the other judges. By the way, many of whom are actually fine judges. I mean, Judge Bibas, who in the Third Circuit, who was appointed by Trump, went against Trump very heavily after the 2020 election, wrote an opinion that they put up in the January 6th. They've quoted in the January 6th committee because it was so eloquently written, criticizing what Trump was trying to do with that lawsuit. So I don't necessarily think all those judges are caught up in this, but Mitch McConnell has convinced a lot of the country that there's an illegitimacy there. And now judicial nominations have become almost this game, a political game, as opposed to what it was when you and I were growing up, Michael, when Antonin Scalia was getting confirmed unanimously by the United States Senate. Unanimously. Justice Ginsburg by massive super majorities, because everyone kind of understood, whoever the president is appoints who they are, but as long as the person's qualified, we're going to let them on.
Yeah, look, I'll never forget when I was younger and in school, and we were talking about the Supreme Court, and we were talking about the court system, federal court judges having these lifetime appointments. And I just remember having a debate with my teacher and saying that I think it's fucked up. I don't think anybody should have a job for life where they are completely immune from responsibility for mistakes, intentional or unintentional. Like, I have a whole issue with, even, for example, federal court judges. Why can't they be for 16 years? Why can't they be for 12 years? Why does it have to be for life? I tell you, and I am a firm believer that in my criminal case, Judge Pauly, I believe he's corrupt. I know he's deceased now, and it's not nice to talk about the dead, but I think he was corrupt. He was in on it with the prosecutors. There was absolutely enough information he had that demonstrated there was no tax evasion or misrepresentation to a bank. They didn't care. And what we found out down the road, because in my scenario, the drip, drip, drip of information that comes in, Jeffrey Berman, the guy who was the head of the Southern District of New York Criminal Division, wrote in his own book the fact that he was contacted by Maine Justice, by Bill Barr, in order to change pleas and in order to do things in my specific case that would have wiped Trump's name out of everything and only go after me for crimes that were unaffiliated to Trump. And those are the crimes that were made up. So I have a real problem with this lifetime appointment on anything. And we also see the danger that's there. Like right now, I believe that you have maybe Justice Thomas or Alito. Neither of them will step down, even though they probably want to retire based on age, but they won't do it because it would give Biden the opportunity to put 2 Supreme Court judges on. And instead, they're going to sit and wait in hopes that Trump wins, so that way he could put 2 more young people on that will ultimately vote the way the Heritage Foundation wants them to vote. And then we're really fucked as a country.
Well, I think, it's interesting, lifetime judicial service, that is written into the Constitution. A lot of people, including, I mentioned Ro Khanna, my friend, they have these proposals to change that. The problem is, and he thinks otherwise, but I disagree with him on this, I think you have to amend the Constitution in order to change that. And good luck getting 2/3 of the Senate to, agree on anything, getting 75% of state legislatures to agree on anything. It's just never going to happen. And so I think we're stuck with lifetime appointment for judges. I think the upside of it is that obviously you have people who are appointed by Trump who have gone against him, let's say, for example, on when he tried to overturn the 2020 election. That is possible in part because that's encouraged by the fact that these judges have nothing more they need from him.
Well, that's true.
Right?
But so let me say this, the Constitution does not state the number of Supreme Court judges, right? I mean, if Biden tomorrow wanted to add 5, he could certainly do that. I don't know why that they're not doing it. Fuck it. Let's have a Supreme Court of 100 people over the course of the next, X number of years. But add more people to the Supreme Court to counterbalance the damage that von Schitzenpants has already done. Because you start putting people on who are all these, theocratic, these Southern white Christian coalition Bible belters, it's a danger. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it right now.
If you play that out from a game theory perspective, we end up with a baseball stadium full of Supreme Court justices,
Okay.
because Mitch McConnell, or whoever his successor is soon, they'll make sure that we have we add 100 Republican Supreme Court justices the next time they get a president. That's the problem with it. There's no end point to it. That's the issue. It's like you have to add so many Supreme Court justices that it's physically impossible for the other side to add more and fit them all in the room, right?
Yeah,
We'll end up with a Zoom of
Let me ask you this
10,000
question,
judges.
since we're on that maniac Mitch McConnell. In your opinion, what drives people like McConnell? Is it racism? Is it some weird idea about Christianity? I mean, why do you think anyone gets that much power and then uses it to abuse so many Americans?
Power, that you use the word that I would say. He's doing this for power. And for some people, that's an end in and of themselves. There was someone in my state who was very powerful, kind of controlled a lot. In my state, is since no longer in office. And a lot of people in my state said that he cared only about preserving his own position and was just very calculating about it. Did not care. He was Democrat, but did not care about anything in terms of policy or getting anything done. It was purely about maintaining his position at the top. And I think for someone like Mitch McConnell, that's what it was all about. He's always used to counting the votes. He's used to staying on top. And so, for someone like myself, when I look at this, I'm not obviously cut from a very different cloth. But to me, the whole purpose of attaining power is to do something with it, so that you can say in the annals of history, when you're talking to your kids, the end of your life, you're like, I did this. When the stakes were down, when there was an insurrection, I came out and I held the president accountable and I defended the Constitution. And you know what? Mitch McConnell's never going to be able to say that. He moved his lips and said some words after January 6th. But when the crap hit the fan, he voted against holding Trump accountable. And in fact, I think you and I both know that if he came out and said, I'm telling all of you, Senate Republicans, you vote to hold Trump accountable, to impeach this man and convict him, I think that they would have had the votes to do it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you 100%. Now, Renato, you've worked inside the intelligence community and you clearly understand the law. You feel like things are collapsing within those institutions?
Wow. It's very hard for me to say. I mean, I will say I have a great reverence for federal law enforcement because I worked in law enforcement for a decade. I obviously go up against the Justice Department now. I mean, I do a lot of civil work too, but I go up against the Justice Department and I go at them hard because, in my opinion, that's the way that the Constitution is supposed to work. You're supposed to fight like heck for your clients, and I do. I'm extremely aggressive against them, but there is that still within me, that respect for the institution and for the people that are there. I am concerned about some of the things that I've seen, and I'm afraid for what would come after. When we were talking about potential appointees by Trump, the examples I used to you, Jeffrey Clark and John Eastman, are both men who are extraordinarily corrupt. I mean, Jeffrey Clark is a man who held a very high-ranking position in the Justice Department, a position that there are literally thousands of lawyers across the United States who would give their left arm to have that position, to cap off their career by heading the civil division of the United States Department of Justice. And he used that position, abused it, to try to overturn our election, essentially overturn our constitutional system of government. And he may be the next Attorney General of the United States.
Yeah.
That is what's at stake for me, because I care so deeply about those institutions that for me, that would just be a devastating result. It's not as personal for me as it is for you, but for me, that is something, because I poured so much of my life into it. It means something.
You see, but what I try to do, whether it's with this podcast, whether it's with my other podcast, Political Beatdown, my television appearances, my writings, and so on, the books, I want you to feel the same way that I feel. I want you to step into my shoes and feel the same anger towards what Donald Trump did, weaponized the Department of Justice against his critics, against his enemies. Because with all due respect to you and to every listener on this show and to everyone that, every American, you could be next. You could be next. Simply because somehow you, Renato, become Donald Trump's next muse. All of a sudden, the Department of Justice, which you and I both have tremendous respect for the law. I've never broken the law. Prior to all of this bullshit that happened in my life, I've only had an issue with law enforcement once in my entire life. I got a speeding ticket in 1985. I have one speeding ticket my entire life. 1985, I was driving back to Washington from New York to go back to college. And I was going about 13 miles an hour over the speed limit in New Jersey. I don't have speeding tickets. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I never had any of that shit in my life. I've never not paid taxes on time. I've never asked for an extension until the 2017 issue. And then after that, never asked for another extension again either. So I have, like you, tremendous respect for law enforcement. When I see a police officer in the street, I stop and I thank them. And I've been doing it my whole life, not just now. So like you, I have tremendous respect. But what I have witnessed with Donald Trump is a weaponization of this Department of Justice like never seen before. And the danger of that is exactly what they did to me. I don't want to see that happen to anyone ever again. And the only way to do that is to stop them at the ballot box.
Well, that's something that I think is important. One thing that I have had a different perspective than a lot of legal analysts who've commented on Trump's cases and so forth is I do think sometimes there's almost been a false hope that's been created that don't worry, the legal system's got this handled.
No way.
You guys can go about your life, take your kid to soccer practice, focus on your career. We got this. The legal system is going to take care of Donald Trump. And I've always been very skeptical of that. It's possible. There are times where it looked more possible than others. But realistically, I was always skeptical that the criminal justice system was going to solve this tremendous threat to our democracy. I've always believed that that was ultimately going to be the responsibility of all of us as citizens. One thing that really scares me, Michael, is that people have been sitting back and hoping that like some judge or prosecutor is going to save America for them instead of getting off their asses and saving it themselves.
Yeah. Or join me, join you. Right? And so join a movement in order to ensure maybe it's not you who's going to be for 5 days sitting on a witness stand, but at least join me in this movement. Make sure that you're fully registered to vote. Make sure that everyone in your house is registered to vote. Make sure that you help to get them to the polls on November 5th. That's the important thing. But, here's another thing that Trump said that scares the piss out of me. He intends to dismantle the FBI, the CIA, our intelligence community. My first question to you is, why do you think that he said that? And what do you think that his ultimate goal is to achieve?
He sees that as a threat to himself and his own power. He saw the FBI almost took him down. He was very scared during the Mueller investigation. And I don't think he ever wants to be in that position again.
Yeah. And so he's going to dismantle. This is the same idiot that turned around and said before the whole world while sitting in Helsinki with Vladimir Putin, he strongly said he didn't do it. He didn't do it. And I believe him more than I believe my own intelligence community. I mean, talk about fucking chutzpah, I mean, to say that you don't believe America's intelligence community, the best in the world, you believe a former KGB agent because he turned around and he said that you were smart? He's stroking his ass, and this idiot's falling for it, just like the 70 million Americans that fell for his shit the second time.
Yeah, I will say it is. I believe in my heart of hearts that there's a real center in America. There are moderate people in America who see Trump for what he is. What really scares me, Michael, I really believe that there's going to come a time in the next 5 years where you and I are going to have a world without Donald Trump, where he moved on. I mean, maybe he's still going to be, people will still be talking about it, but he's not going to be a threat to have power. But when that time does come, there's 30-40% of our country who have been indoctrinated by him. A lot of them are my family members, people I know who have been misinformed, been deceived. And I am really concerned about where it leaves our country, even if he loses, which is what I'm hoping. Obviously, that's not a guarantee. But I do think our country is really at an inflection point. People say every 4 years, Michael, this is the most important election of your lifetimes. 2016, that was legit the case. And if more people hadn't taken the ad election off, or hadn't been complacent, or hadn't just voted out of some sort of emotional whatever, we would be in a different spot as a country right now.
Yeah, totally agree. So look, Renato, the hour goes by very quickly here on Mea Culpa. My last question, it goes back to MAGA Mike Johnson. The guy turned around and he said he wants to see America return to a white, Christian, nationalistic country. Now, like I said, I read quite a bit of history, books. It was really the one topic that I've always enjoyed in school. I don't ever remember America being a white Christian nationalistic country. And there's a big problem here because, well, several problems. The first is the United States is a melting pot of all races, religions, creeds, colors, etc. I mean, it's the melting pot of the world. What the hell is this idiot talking about? And then what happens hypothetically to people like myself who's Jewish, or if you're Muslim, or Hindu, or whatever religion that you practice, if it's not Christianity? What happens to you? They throw you out? Do you get executed? Do they then turn around and say, you know what, we're putting all of you in California and the rest of the country could be white Christian nationalists?
So he's hooking into a whole line of thinking. I would say thinking is a strong word, but a whole line of disinformation that's being spread amongst Christian evangelicals in particular. And I will say this because I was raised evangelical. I have a lot of family members who are. They are being told by their pastors, by TV preachers, by their media, the evangelical media, that Trump is ordained by God to be our president, that we need to have a Christian nation, that America's always been a Christian nation. And really what that means, Michael, is essentially imposing their value system on everyone else. And I understand exactly what you mean. I mean, my wife is Jewish. And so obviously anyone who's doesn't fit that mold is outside of it. And by the way, people who aren't evangelical, Catholics, for example, would not be regarded as that either. They're not part of that same value system. It's a very bizarre strain of, I would say, like I said, thought's not the right way of putting it, but it's this whole bizarre line that they're feeding of essentially, let's take over America and turn it into some sort of theocracy, which is the opposite of what America has always been.
Which is now what we're seeing with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, this nonsense regarding IVF, right? In terms of you could be charged with murder if, you dispose of, an embryo, of an egg, a frozen egg. Yeah. I mean, come on. I mean, this is crazier than The Handmaid's Tale, than the dystopian story of The Handmaid's Tale. But anyway, Renato Mariotti, thank you, my friend. I definitely need to have you back because over the course of the next, we'll call it 9 months, this shit's going to really start getting heavy, and need your analysis. So I thank you for it.
Well, you're welcome. Happy to be on. Thanks for a fantastic conversation, and hope to have more conversations with you to come.
Very soon. Thank you, pal.